5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to the F1 pit lane here at Silverstone Circuit. The British Grand Prix is complete, and it was Max Verstappen who took the top step of the podium this afternoon alongside two British drivers. But let me just set the scene for you. We are sitting basking in sunshine. There was so much talk, wasn't there, guys? Harry Benjamin and Sam Bird alongside me. So much talk of rain this afternoon. A couple of drops. They didn't really amount to much, and now we've got glorious sunshine. The fans, as you can hear in the background, are loving still being part of the F1 action. What a weekend.
Oh, this is just amazing, isn't it? I mean, the main straight is now gone. It's just covered with people. Everybody, as soon as the checkered flag came down and they were allowed out of the circuit, they invaded the track. And you can hear in the background as well, we've got the trucks and the lorries coming in too for the dismantling of the paddock before we move on to Hungary in the next couple of weeks. But you can hear the chanting as well in the background. The fans here are something else.
There are, I would say, a few thousand people on the main straight here, Sam. This has been such an incredible spectacle. We think close to 500,000 people have made it to Silverstone over the course of the weekend. They've been treated to some pretty good action, I'd say.
They've been treated to some amazing action. You know, two Brits on the podium. I've never seen so many people at Silverstone, and I know what this place is like to get out of. We may not get home until July.
But you know
it's
what?
a little bit of a worry, but what an amazing day. The weather's held out, as we said. We're here in the, well, towards the beginning of the pit lane, as the drivers were to come into the pit lane by the Mercedes FIA safety cars,
yeah.
And by the Haas garages. We've got the likes of Billy Munger, David Coulthard, and people like that in front of us. Mark Webber, and the fans are in their thousands chanting and cheering their names. It's a great atmosphere.
You're getting excited looking at, former F1 drivers. I'm getting excited looking at the trucks. I'm a little bit of a truck aficionado. There is nothing like a Formula One truck to get you excited on a Sunday afternoon. And as you say, Harry, they are here to pat down the paddock and get themselves ready for Hungary in a couple of weeks' time. But before we get excited for Hungary, we need to take a look back at that race. It was Max Verstappen on pole position alongside Lando Norris on the front row. So the British fans were already excited about what might occur off the start. When the lights went out, it was Lando Norris that shot into the lead. Was anyone expecting that?
I couldn't believe it when I saw it. You actually asked us in the build-up to the show, what are you going to be saying, Harry, going down to turn one? I have a little joke. Oh, Norris down on the inside goes through. And that's exactly what happened. Verstappen had a poor start, let's face it. Norris, really good, clean ahead into turn one and kept that lead. Piastri and the other McLaren from third as well was also right there and challenging Verstappen. But because Piastri was third, Verstappen just had enough of an advantage to get his elbows out and hold him back a bit. But Norris leading for the first few laps of this race, and he built that gap up to a second at some points before Verstappen, got up to speed, got up to temperature, and then was able to eventually get it. I don't think any of us were under the impression that Norris was going to be on for the win here, but it gave the British fans and all of us something to smile about.
They were on their feet, weren't they? I think they were dreaming of a British driver standing on the top step of the podium once again. Max Verstappen had a bit of wheel spin. How difficult is it to manage a Formula One start these days, Sam?
It's super difficult to manage. There's so many different areas of the start that can go wrong. So before you do the start, you do your burnouts, make sure that the outside of the tyre is hot. Max Verstappen's been sitting there longer than everybody, so he's a slight disadvantage there. Secondly, then he'll do a bite point find the perfect bite point for the clutch. And thirdly, then he'll choose the amount of throttle to use for the race start. Now, I watched him do a race start on Friday after FP1, and he did a really good start, and he had really minimal throttle engaged for the race start. He had a little bit more throttle for the race start actually here on Sunday. I think it's hurt him. He's had an initial flare-up of wheel spin. Lando, on the other hand, did the exact opposite. He was super cautious at the beginning and had perfect drive in the mid-phase of the launch.
I think Max had to work for, I love this. The fans are so vocal, desperate for pictures with some of their heroes. I love that. Give us a wave, give us a wave. He had to work hard for the win today. Okay. It wasn't a nightmare for him out there, but he wasn't happy with that final stint either. The soft tyre, not to his liking. So we've seen him under a tiny bit of pressure, would you say, this weekend?
Yeah.
And he hit the pit wall on exit.
The
earlier
only
on in the
mistake of
weekend.
his season so far.
I'm chalking them up.
You don't even know whether Max Verstappen is having to operate at his very best at the moment. He's so dominant that it's almost like he can have a fairly ordinary weekend and still win the Grand Prix, comfortably. It's hard to see when we're going to see him under a lot of pressure in the coming months.
This is also one of the smallest margins he's won by this year, isn't it?
But we had a safety car.
Seconds. That is true, but even so, before the safety car, he wasn't exactly pulling seconds and seconds away from Lando Norris. And I don't think that's because Norris, even with these McLaren upgrades, was a few seconds off the pace of the Red Bull and what Verstappen's showing. I still don't think throughout the whole season we've really seen exactly what Verstappen can do in that Red Bull, because why risk it all when you don't have to?
Absolutely. Well, I spoke to Max Verstappen after this win here at Silverstone, where, as you can hear, the fans are still loving being part of the atmosphere. This is what Max said to me a little earlier on.
Well, I mean, the start wasn't fantastic. We had a lot of wheel spin, which I need to look into why that was exactly. But after that, I think once I passed Lando, it took me a few laps to cool down the tyres. And after that, I think we had good pace, because I think the last 10, 15 laps of that stint, we were 9 seconds in the lead again, which I think was very good. But then, of course, because of the safety car, everyone was back together. And we had the soft tyre to the end, which seemed to overheat a little bit more than I thought. So it was a bit more difficult to keep the pace up, but luckily the first 2-3 laps of that stint I had already quite a big gap, so I could just manage it to the end.
We know that you've already spoken about how it was difficult, that last stint. Why were you struggling so much? Can you identify those problems?
I don't know. I mean, I tried to manage them like I normally do, but it seemed like they were just running a little bit hot. I mean, there are a lot of high-speed corners around here in Silverstone, so when you're on the softest compound, they get very hot. And behind me, of course, they were pushing flat out because they were fighting, of course, to try and stay ahead of each other. So I couldn't really, of course, bring them in like I wanted to, but that's normally not really an excuse. I think the tyre today was just not really working that well for us, the soft.
It's interesting hearing from Max after a race where there were a few foibles, a few little weaknesses that he was having to deal with. He'll go away and sort them out. I don't think we need to worry that, suddenly he's lost all his ability to drive or manage tyres or get off the start line. Surely Hungary will be back to status quo.
Absolutely. I think, if we're trying to be picky and point at something that we can latch on to, it probably is the start to Max Verstappen, where he's not every time clean and getting away. But there's not a lot else you can say. So I think Hungary, they always describe it Monaco without the walls, don't they? It's a sort of half street track again. Verstappen, I was going to say he likes Hungary. He likes every track right now. So I think it will be continued dominance.
I agree. I think Max Verstappen will be the clear favourite going into Hungary. But I think the order will change in Hungary behind Red Bull. I can't see the McLaren, as brilliant as it was to see the Papaya Army up there in second and fourth here at Silverstone as a final order. I don't think they're going to be as competitive in Hungary. I don't think it's a track that suits them. I think that we'll see a little bit more of Aston Martin. I can see it being their kind of circuit. I think Mercedes could do better at Hungary as well, so expect to see George Russell, Lewis Hamilton fighting for a decent place as well.
You're right, McLaren saying there will be an ebb and flow over the course of the season, as there often is with performance when it comes to the circuits that suit certain cars. Let's hear from Lando Norris then, P2, in front of his home crowd at Silverstone. What a start. Can you just tell me what it was like to lead the British Grand Prix, and was there a moment where you thought you might be able to hang on?
No chance, but yeah, I mean, there was two things I hoped. One was everyone else behind had a terrible start and it was just me and Max nice on our own and blah blah blah. Or was that I had a jump on Max and I could manage to lead and kind of control it for a few laps, which is exactly what happened. So that made my life, easier for a few laps. I didn't have to look ahead and behind. I could just crack on and push. Just Max had too much pace for me in the beginning. It was a long race still to go and I didn't want to over push and compromise too many things towards the middle of the race in the pit stop phase. So I made a wide decision to not challenge him too much as I wanted to just try a little bit more. He was just too quick for us, but Red Bull have done a very good job. So it's not a surprise that we've had to succeed to a Red Bull, but at the same time I think we should be very happy in doing so at the same time.
The strategist then put you onto the hard tyre. Did you annoy someone at breakfast today or something? Because that was quite a hard job they were putting you up to.
Hey, no pun. Yeah, I was kind of screaming for the softs. I was like, please think of the soft tyre.
Did you know you were getting that when you came in?
I mean, they were saying the hard, and I was like, no, let's go softs. Please think of the softs. And they were like, okay, box, you're on the hard tyre. So I was a bit like, oh, great. I think if there was no safety car, it was just VSC, hard tyre was completely fine. But having a new soft tyre behind me on a Mercedes with Lewis driving, I was like, what chance do I have now? So I thought we kind of messed it all up at that point. But actually, the new tyre, the hard, took maybe a couple laps to really get going. But once I got it going, once I got the battery back up and managed to hold Lewis off, then I got a good pace and we were quite a bit quicker than him again. So yeah, it's just a very nerve-wracking, tricky, stressful few laps. But it was all under control, so it was all right.
They obviously believed in you.
I know, they
and
must have done. What else they were thinking.
Thank you. The engineers at McLaren did make Lando work hard this afternoon. That hard tyre at the end, I was worried he was going to be a sitting duck. Who are they cheering for there? It definitely wasn't Rosanna Tennant.
Well, I would never say
Steve.
never, Rosanna. Yeah.
Steve.
We all love Steve.
Steve Jones. There we go. Getting a lot of love.
We, in the commentary box, especially the call to go on the soft compound of tyre, especially when the safety car coming out, we were ripping our hair out in the commentary box at one stage because George Russell really had showcased what was capable on the soft compound of tyre, pretty much running a full, almost half race distance, the full first stint on that soft. And so quite naturally, we then thought, well, that's surely shown to everybody else, that's the tyre we can switch onto. And so under safety car, or VSC first, then safety car coming into play for Kevin Magnussen's Haas, which conked out. We couldn't understand why first McLaren with Piastri not going onto the soft, then Norris not going to the soft. But it wasn't as big of a panic as we all thought, because although it got a bit hairy between Norris and Hamilton initially, who was on the soft compound tyre, and had leapfrogged Piastri. You still with me? This is the battle for second and third.
Oh yeah, I'm with you.
Norris then was able to just keep that Mercedes ahead, which struggles, keep that McLaren ahead, because the Mercedes seems to struggle a little bit more in a straight line. It's the corners where they can keep up. And then George Russell said on the radio, because he was having his own scrap trying to catch Piastri, that these McLarens just have good pace. And that's simply the matter.
Yeah, both Mercedes staring at the back of a McLaren. I'm sure they've got plenty of ideas of what they'd like to do when they get back to the factory in terms of pushing their car on. Let's hear from Oscar Piastri then, just off the podium. His teammate Lando Norris, who did make the podium, said he should have been on the third step today.
To be hanging on to the back of a Red Bull was a very happy surprise at the start. But yeah, just super proud of the whole team and what we've managed to do to turn around from the start of the year. But yeah, it felt nice, and to behind Max, just a shame with the safety car timing for Lewis. But we can be massively proud of the effort we've put in this weekend, the result we've had, and we'll try and repeat it for the rest of the season. Well,
can you repeat it? That, I guess, is the big question. Do more upgrades come to Hungary? Do you get that front wing? What's that looking like for you?
The front wing I should have, yes. There's some more little things still coming, which is exciting. I think the bulk of our upgrades we've got now. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
You're watching Lando Norris on the podium. It'll be you next, cool. I feel.
I hope so. Yeah, I think we've made a massive step forward. I think over one lap we made a good step forward, but clearly on Sundays we're a hell of a lot better than we were previously. I was slightly nervous into the race that maybe we'd fall back a bit, but we were clearly the next quickest guys behind Max, which is quite the turnaround from where we were at the start of the season.
Well done.
Thank you.
His time will come. Oscar Piastri, surely a podium at some point, if this car and this pace is real.
Let's not forget, Oscar Piastri this weekend had a car that didn't have all the same upgrades as his more experienced teammate Lando Norris. It was most of the way there, but not fully there, and he was able to hang with him in third place for most of the Grand Prix. If the strategy had been slightly different, absolutely he had a nailed down third place. But I think he'll be going to bed tonight maybe slightly frustrated, but hugely satisfied with his personal achievements and his drive. He did everything right.
I'll tell you, someone else who was pleased with his efforts today was Mark Webber. When I was chatting to Oscar, he was waiting to my left just to give Oscar a handshake, a bit of a hug, and say well done. And I think the feeling is that, you know, your time will come. So Oscar Piastri finishing 4th, just off the podium. We'll discuss how Mercedes got on next. It was Lewis Hamilton on the 3rd step of the podium, a podium that he knows so well. And when I spoke to his father, Anthony Hamilton, on the grid before the race, he said this place gives him 2 tenths. Now, I'm not sure how that actually plays out in the race, but he got onto the podium this afternoon. What a result for him.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if it does give him 2 cents. I mean, we're outside, and there's a huge amount of fans to our right that are still here, and you know, even that just gives you a little bit of an energy
You
boost.
feeling good about yourself?
I feel like I've got 2 tenths in me, that's for sure. But, I mean, Lewis, again, it paid off for him. The safety car helped him, and switching onto the soft compounder tyre certainly did so. He's been a bit downbeat. Both Mercedes have downbeat at the start of the weekend throughout because they were just lacking a little bit of pace, and the rear end of that Mercedes was falling off left, right and centre. And we all found it so curious as to why they were doing long runs on the soft compounder tyre in practice. Well, we now know why, because his teammate, well, both of them came alive on the soft compounder tyre in the race. So Hamilton on a podium, 2 Brits, fantastic.
Let's hear from Lewis, and then we'll talk a bit more about his race. Congratulations, Lewis, to be back up on that podium in front of your home crowd. I imagine it was a special one. Some people saying perhaps you got lucky today, but would you say you make your own luck in this sport?
I think partly you make your own luck. As I said, I plan to go onto the medium tyre and go as long as possible and hope a safety car would come. And it did. I stayed out longer than all the other guys, most of the guys that are ahead of me, and that's the name of the game. I think in the last year and a half, the safety cars never landed in the right time for me. I've been unlucky every single time for God knows how long. It's been pretty terrible. And so today was the first time that it went in my way, and I'm grateful for it. So it's a bit of luck of the draw, but ultimately we did a great job today.
In terms of a boost in confidence and maybe a reality check, where do you see the balance at the end of this weekend with the McLaren pace?
This weekend, and it continues to be, but this weekend is a reality check for us, I think. And I think we need to have serious conversations back at the factory about, you know, for us drivers in the car, we can feel and we know there are some strengths, a long run pace, for example, but there are some serious weaknesses within the car, and the proof is in what McLaren have done.
So you're going to be back in the factory this week?
Yes.
That was a nod. Well done. Sam, yes, Lewis got a little bit lucky with the timing, but that's racing, isn't it? You just have to be in the right place at the right time sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Mercedes have got some work to do. Let's not beat about the bush. They're not where they want to be. But at the same time, I was speaking to Bradley Lord at Mercedes, and he said, Sam, remember, and everybody should remember, we are second in the World Championship right now. So, yeah, they're not where they want to be, but they're only one place off where they want to be. Okay, Red Bull are a long way ahead, but it's not all doom and gloom.
He's spinning a good PR line there. Of course, Bradley Lord, head of comms at Mercedes.
But
you took it hook, line and sinker.
No, but it is true, right? They're not. It's not like they're 6th in the World Championship. They're 2nd. There's a lot of room for improvement, but they're one off where they want to be.
And I think, as Lewis said, you know, he's going to be in the factory working hard with the guys. And again, I go back to my conversation with his father on the grid. He said it's looking like the contract's going to be signed soon. So this kind of performance helps. But I think the reality check that they've got this weekend, primarily from McLaren with their upgraded car and their improved performance, I think that will also keep him kind of intrigued as to what he can still do with this team to get them back to the front.
For sure. McLaren, as you say, making a jump. Let's not forget Aston Martin making a huge jump at the start of the year as well. But I think Lewis thrives on the fight back. He loves the fight. And I wonder, would we be having these conversations? Would he still be thinking about sticking around if he wasn't suddenly finding himself off the pace comparative to where that Mercedes has been over the last decade? He now has a new mindset, wants to drive the team forward again, back to where they are, because yes, they are second in the constructors, but the gap is massive to Red Bull, who are in a league of their own, and I don't think Hamilton will be happy until he's back up challenging for wins.
So Lewis Hamilton taking that third step of the podium. Behind him, Oscar Piastri, as we've already discussed. And then it was George Russell in P5. Went for that different strategy, started on the soft, as you said, Harry, almost a guinea pig for the rest of the grid so that they had a bit of info on how that soft would perform. I think he was disappointed today, and you heard him on the radio, didn't he? He was saying, what's Lewis on? And there was a sort of frustration there that...
Well, he pitted much earlier than Lewis did, and he started in the soft and did a great job on the softs. I think he did over 30 laps on the soft tyre at the beginning of the race with a car full of fuel. So the strategy today and the events that led to Lewis coming third, Lewis was fortunate today to beat George, and he was very fortunate to beat Oscar, and it could have very easily have been the other way around for Mercedes. I think that's why you heard George on the radio a little bit frustrated and disappointed, because he was legitimately in front of his teammate.
And I think they wanted to split the strategies between the two drivers, George and Lewis, because of what they've seen in the support categories here. I think they wanted to have two options available to them. And George said to me actually after the race that, there's hindsight, obviously perfect 2020 vision. When you look back, you'd have probably done some things differently. But, P5 for him, still scoring some good points as a team. So let's look behind George then, outside the top 5. It was Sergio Perez who made it up to P6 after a difficult qualifying session. I'm going to say another difficult qualifying session. And I think Christian Horner will be pleased with the recovery, but he doesn't want this to keep happening.
No, exactly. I think Christian Horner said, the target is for Perez to get into the top 6 as the wind starts
to blow down the pit lane.
Pick up a little bit. Of course, it's Chandok signing the autographs on the fencing there. Excellent stuff.
Karun Chandok, yeah. Love it.
But so I think Christian Horner will be pleased, but it is qualifying that Perez has to sort out, and he has had a bit of bad luck, but at the same time, he can't be having these fightbacks through the field all the time. He is good enough to finish second behind Max Verstappen, but I don't think Red Bull mind too much. I saw Dr. Helmut Marko smiling away and having a laugh with Sergio Perez after qualifying yesterday, just outside their hospitality in the paddock. Because as long as Verstappen is in a league of his own, they don't have any threat from another team. So, and Helmut Marko has said, well, who are we going to replace Perez with? We don't think we really have anybody in the pipeline.
Didn't he also say that Nick de Vries isn't good enough to replace it? I remember the
Poor
rest
old
of the
Nick
quote.
De Vries.
Yes. Not a great day for Nick down in P17. Some more standout performances then. Alex Albon up in the points again, a P8 for him in the Williams. Just so comfortable, I think, at the moment. And this track seemed to suit them.
Yeah, although Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, was telling me and Sam all weekend long, don't get too excited by the Williams pace in practice. But
they were right up there, P2, P3.
Absolutely,
yeah.
and Logan Sargent got his career best result this weekend as well, just outside of the points. But once again, it was Albon, Sam, in the headline, getting the most out of that Williams. But he was in a great fight with Alonso, right?
He was in a great fight with Fernando Alonso, and I'm going to put my neck on the line here and say, look, if Albon had qualified, let's say 5th, I think he could have raced to 5th today. I genuinely do. I think that the straight line speed of that Williams enables him just to stay ahead of cars in a way that let's say the Mercedes can't overtake him and or wouldn't be able to stay ahead of him. That Williams is going to be a real threat to people come Monza. I'm going to put it out there.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how the team develops as well. With the new leadership of James Vowles, of course, moving across from Mercedes to be their team principal. Exciting times, hopefully, to come for Williams, because you want to see those historic teams especially fighting up at the front or nearer the front.
Absolutely. I genuinely... I'm going to... Early prediction.
You're sticking your neck on the line again.
I'm going to put my neck on the line.
For Monza as well.
Yeah.
Surely that's a given.
No, right. Okay. Albon for a podium at Monza.
No, come on.
It's out there. I don't know whether I'm going to be here doing the 5 Live 4 Monza.
I've got ready by then. After a prediction
my
like that.
prediction is Alexander Albon for a podium at Monza.
Well, we'll meet again in September then.
Everyone remember
Sam.
that. Remember that. Write it down.
Talking of Monza, of course, Ferrari will be racing on home soil there. Today, more consternation, more deliberation, lots of plans, lots of strategy calls, and they got a bit close wheel to wheel as well, the two of them, didn't they?
They did. And I think there's a bit of a frosty relationship developing between Leclerc and Sainz. We've heard Sainz multiple times on the radio this year, wanting to be let past Leclerc because he's the faster driver, he's better. The strategy's not playing out. And Sainz has a habit of overruling his team when it comes to strategy. Leclerc, not so much. But I think both are now developing a bit of maybe a slight distrust towards the Ferrari strategy team because they can get it right, and they have done, but they more often than not get it wrong. And today, having the back and forth, at one point, Sainz, they weren't really sure what their strategy was. And then he dropped like a stone, really, in the last 10 laps, wasn't it? He lost about 3 or 4 spots and then ended up fighting with Leclerc. And there were only 3 points that they picked up at the end.
Yeah, P9 for Charles Leclerc, ahead of his teammate Carlos Sainz, P10. I mean, glass half full listeners will think, well, at least they react to the situation and they're not in the most comfortable position like Max and Red Bull, who can just say, no, we stick to our guns, we do our strategy that we set out to do, we won't be swayed one way or the other. Whereas Ferrari aren't in that position and they do have to switch and change. So that is potentially why we see plan A, 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, G, whatever it is.
Well, technically, they were the 5th best team this weekend, which isn't good enough for the Scuderia. It's they started the year as the 2nd best team. Here they were the 5th best team, and that's not quite good enough from the team from Maranello.
We're about to get decapitated, I think, by
we're being ushered
some cables.
away.
Glorious hands from F1's trying to de-rig that incredible camcat that you see, the camera that flies above the track and gets some beautiful shots. They're trying to remove us, I think, before our heads are removed unwillingly. So we'll just wander down the pit lane, actually, a nice place to find oneself on a Sunday afternoon when Formula One's been in town. So Ferrari rounding out the top 10, P9 and P10. If we look further back down the order, it was P11 for Logan Sargent, as you mentioned, Harry, just outside the points, but sort of backing up the fact that Williams have made a step on. Valtteri Bottas, P12, after a difficult start for him. He was disqualified in qualifying yesterday. Nico Hülkenberg, P13, ahead of Lance Stroll in the second Aston Martin, P14 for him. I think, Sam, you've said, more to come from the Aston Martins with this ebb and flow that we see when it comes to different circuits suiting different cars and also upgrade sort of cycles. Yeah,
we got used to being excited by the Fernando Alonso show and the Aston Martin kind of climb up the order for 2023, but that's not always going to be the case. They weren't a front runner at all last year or the year before, and it's been exciting and great, but we shouldn't get used to it and make it like a normal thing. This is going to ebb and flow through the year. There'll be circuits where the Aston Martin is suited to. There'll be circuits where it's a little bit more difficult. He still scored some decent points today, and we roll on to Hungary. I think Hungary could be a good one for him.
Yeah, so P7 for Fernando Alonso and P14 for Lance Stroll, his teammate. Zhou Guanyu, P15 ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, P16 ahead of his own teammate Nick De Vries, and P17. Those upgrades for the AlphaTauri not really bearing the fruit that they were after, Harry.
No, and they brought a hefty amount of updates as well for both cars. They were towing the PR line. Yuki Tsunoda was, at least in the press releases, saying, well, it's going to take more than one race to analyse the data that we're getting from this. But when you look at other teams that apply the upgrade, hello McLaren, and straight away it's flicked a switch. AlphaTauri, bottom of the constructors table, work to do.
And we always hear teams saying we only bring an upgrade if we know it's going to add performance, so it's even more frustrating then. Pierre Gasly, P18, that was disappointing. I really enjoyed seeing him race today, but it wasn't to be. A bit of bad luck for him, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't bad luck. It was hard racing through Stowe a couple of laps before and Lance Stroll going off the circuit, and then when something like that happens as a driver, you remember it, you bank that. And then next time you're in a battle with that person, it's a little bit more personal and you leave each other not quite as much room. And then all of a sudden, lo and behold, they come together at the last chicane and one of them gets a puncture. It's Pierre Gasly and he's out of the race. So it goes to show that when this happens, drivers remember. And then it
never forgets.
Exactly. It can be difficult from there.
Well, P18 for Pierre Gasly, and then 2 DNFs, and it was Kevin Magnussen whose engine let go, and that was what actually kind of revitalised the race, I think, with the safety car and all that ensued after that. And it was Esteban Ocon, the first retiree with a hydraulic leak quite early on in the race. So I'd love your driver of the day, if possible.
It's got to be Lando Norris.
Again, I mean, it was the official driver of the day, Lando Norris, but also last weekend, obviously, you got it in Austria too.
Norris, shout out for Piastri, 4th, brilliant.
What about you, Sam?
both McLarens equal for me. I think that I because
You're gonna start getting your own
no,
thoughts
but
now.
Yeah, get off that fence.
Look, okay. Lando, brilliant to get a podium, but Oscar as a rookie, first ever British Grand Prix, that is sublime. Great driving. Fair play to Lewis for getting on the podium. Wily old fox.
You, Rosanna?
I think I'm going to go with Oscar Piastri. I know people are going to say Lando Norris, you guys have just said that, but I think the way he's conducting himself, rookie, just a mature approach for a young guy who's had a year out of racing. I really admire how he's going about this season, learning from his teammate, no doubt, Lando Norris, and hopefully when he gets the full package with the upgraded front wing as well, when perhaps we head to Hungary, I'm really excited to see what this little boost of confidence might have done for him.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. British Grand Prix completed. What a weekend. Sam, I know you're worried about your journey home, but hey, just embrace it. Embrace it.
I can't wait for the 5 or 6 hours all the way back to Sandbanks.
Well, enjoy that. Perhaps you'd like to listen back to the podcast. I tell you
Over
what you
and
can
over,
listen to.
on repeat.
You've probably already listened to it, and actually this is a huge recommendation from all of us. Do listen to Jenny Gow's interview with Sir Lewis Hamilton. Of course, Jenny Gow on the BBC Radio 5 Live team. A wonderful interview that she did with Lewis Hamilton in the lead up to this weekend. Her first interview since that terrible stroke she suffered at the end of last year. She's been in the paddock this weekend. It has been so great to see her. So do give that a listen. But from all of us here, Harry Benjamin and Sam Bird and me, Rosanna Tennant, it's goodbye, and we will talk to you again in the lead up to Hungary.